Asmad Gurubhyo Namaha, Asmad Parama Gurubhyo Namaha, Asmad Sarva Gurubhyo Namaha. So continuing on with our study of Agamas and South Indian Vaishnavism by Vardachari, Dr. Vardachari, V. Vardachari of the French Indological Institute in Pondicherry. We now come to chapter number 4, which is about the Vaikhanasa Agama. Vaikhanasa Agama is one of the two Agamas extant today about which deal with the worship of Lord Vishnu. Up until now, we've been discussing, in previous sessions, we've been discussing all sorts of Agamas, and we've seen the range of Agamas, Shaiva Agamas, Shakta Agamas, and then we've also seen even Agamas that don't, of religious groups that don't follow the Vedas, like Jain Agamas and Bauddha Agamas. So there's a whole range of Agamas. Now we're going to try to hone in on and concentrate on Vaishnava Agamas. So out of Vaishnava Agamas, there's two. There's the Vaikhanasa, which is older, and the Pancharatra. The Vaikhanasa is Vedic, and so is more based on Vedic mantras and Vedic pramanas, Vedic proofs, and the Pancharatra is a little different. So we'll discuss Pancharatra later, but today we're going to discuss this chapter. Chapter 4 is about the Vaikhanasa Agama. So let's have a look at the text. So, chapter 4, Vaikhanasa Agama. The Vaikhanasa Agama describes the method of worshipping Vishnu and prescribes the way of life for those who adopt the Vaikhanasa Sutra. So normally when we talk about methods of worship or methods of rituals, we talk about sutras. Sutras are little threads or little aphorisms, right, which give us step-by-step instructions on how to perform rituals in this case. So we have many sutras. We have sutras which deal with Vedic ritualism, like Apastamba Sutra, Bodhayana Sutra. These are called Kalpa Sutras. In this case, we have Agamic Sutras. And the Vaishnava Agama Sutras, we have the Vaikhanasa Sutra. And I don't know that there are Pancharatric Sutras per se, but here it's talking about the sutra in a general sense and not in a specific sense of aphorisms, right? So, and the Vaikhanasa Sutra would be the way that we would explain the method that we're going to perform the worship. Anyway, we can just say Vaikhanasa Sutra according to the Vaikhanasa Sutra, or we can say according to the Vaikhanasa Agama. So, this is based on Vedic sources meaning sources in Shruti, with Vedic mantras, and derives support for the doctrines which it preaches solely from Vedic texts. So it doesn't appear to find shastric pramana or proofs for its efficacy or for following it, right? In other literature apart from the Vedas, the Vedic Samhitas, the Brahmanas, the Aranyakas, and the Upanishads, which is the Shruti text. The word Vaikhanasa is very old, occurring in early Sanskrit literature. It signifies the Vanaprastha ashrama, which a student who had completed the study of the Vedas could take up even without getting married. Okay, so that's an interesting point. Now, the quote here, he's quoting Vishnu Purana 3:10-15 for that information. So the sage Shobhari, who entered into the householder's life, if any of you know the story of the Shobhari Muni, he was meditating underwater, and he saw the fishes reproducing. And he became attracted to enter Grihastha ashrama, right, and to have a family because he saw the fishes were all having families. And so he broke his meditation and went and became a Grihastha householder. So this sage Shobhari, who entered into household life to be happy with a family, though he used to practice meditation, renounced it and entered into the Vanaprastha ashram. So the system of Varna and Ashrama is known in India. The stages of life are called ashramas. So there's a student phase of life, where people are studying, which is the initial stage of life when one's growing. And then after that, the person has gone to the Gurukula, he's joined the family of the guru, of the teacher, he's learned the Vedas, and then at the end of his Vedic study, he rewards the teacher with some Guru Dakshina, and which is some fee for teaching him. And then he enters into household life. He gets married and has children, and then he takes up the household rituals that a householder has to do. There are very few rituals that the student has to do. The student has to do Sandhyavandanam because he has the Upanayana Samskara. And these are all Vedic samskaras and Vedic rituals. And he has to do some other Vedic rituals like the Samhita Danam, fire ceremony, morning and evening. And then when he becomes a Grihastha, he changes over and he has to tend the household fires, which the specific household fire is called the Garhapatya fire, which is the household fire, which then can be expanded into some other Vedic fires like Ahvaniya, Avasatya, Dakshinagni, and Sabdya. So these are different Vedic fires. These fires have their correlation with some fires that are used in Pancharatric Yagshalas, but we won't talk about that right now. Okay, so he entered into the Grihastha ashram. So Grihastha ashram is the householder life, and then after householder life, there's a retired life. When the children are grown up, usually the husband and the wife take to retired life. When the children get old enough to leave the family, or to support themselves, and then there's another stage in life where even the husband and wife again separate. So in the beginning we are separate. The man and the woman are separate. When they're studying, right? Then afterwards they get married. They're together. They raise a family. And they're together with the family in the household of life. When the family grows up and leaves or is able to look after themselves, then the husband and wife are again on their own. And then finally, again, we are separated. And the idea is that we come into this world alone. We leave this world alone. And at the time of death, we should really try to concentrate upon transcendental things beyond this cycle of birth and death. And therefore, all these attachments to family and to children and to wife, that they are left behind in these different stages. Okay, so that's the idea of the Varna system the ashrama system. In the Varna system, of course, the caste system, and that has to do with the ashrams in the sense that certain Varnas or certain castes or certain classes of people take up one or more of these different phases in life. Not everybody is taking up all these 4 stages of life, but at least Brahminical people are doing that, intellectual people are doing that. So he practiced meditation, he renounced it, he entered into the Vanaprastha or retired life, and followed the way of life prescribed in the Vaikhanasa mode, right? Or as we said, Vaikhanasa Sutra, and became a recluse. Okay, so this is also mentioned. There's another quotation from Vishnu Purana here, 4.2.130, which is given in the Devanagari at the bottom of the page. Right, here the word Vaikhanasa is used in the sense of duties to be performed, I guess. Right, to be performed by a Vanaprastha who is referred to by the word Vaikhanasa. Now, the word Vaikhanasa is also mentioned as a class of hermits in the Bhagavad Purana, right? In the 3rd canto, 12th chapter, 43rd verse, King Prithu took to this way of life and practiced penance as approved by the hermits, Vaikhanasas. We could also see Bhagavad Purana, 4th canto, 23rd chapter, 4th verse. So this word Vaikanas, he's first of all tracing the word Vaikanas. He's going to explain a little bit more about it now. Kalidasa. Now, Kalidasa is a great Sanskrit poet who has written certain dramas in Sanskrit, right? Very famous poet. Refers to this order of life in Abhijnana Shakuntala. Abhijnana Shakuntala is the magnum opus, the greatest work of Kalidas. And so in that book, and let me look at the footnote here. The footnote is Srinivasacharya's commentary on Shakuntala, the work Shakuntala by Kalidas. So Kalidas mentions also this Vaikanasa. So the commentator Srinivasacharya, a Vaikanasan, right, refers to Vaikanasa Vrata, or vow, the vow of being a Vaikanasa, a Vaikanasin. Like here it's being described that Vaikanasin is a type of recluse or a type of retired person, right? Mentioned here as a hard observance by those who practice penance. So here it must be taken to mean an act of penance or austerity, Shramanaka Dharma. So anyway, the word Vaikanasa in the above context does not appear to stand for a follower of the Vaikanasa Agamas. So, okay, so first of all, the first thing that Dr. Varacharya is saying here is he's tracing the word Vaikanasa, and he's showing that in different Puranas like Vishnu Purana and Bhagavad Purana, it means a certain type of recluse, and even in Kalidasa, and also according to some commentators here like Srinivasacharya. Okay, so in this sense, it means a recluse. It's a type of vanaprastha, type of a retired person. Right, but that does not appear to stand for a follower of the Vaikanasa Agama. So here we're talking about the Vaikanasa Agama. So now let's see some more. The word has been explained as belonging to or following Vikanas. So Vikanas is a sage who dug within himself and meditated upon God. Okay, so now we have the understanding of the word Vaikanasa. Those of you who know any Sanskrit grammar, if the word Vikanas, if we take the I in Vikanas and we do guna, we change the vowel in a certain way, it becomes Vai. So Vikanas becomes, just like we have Vishnu becomes Vaishnava. A person who's a Vaishnava is a worshipper of Vishnu. So Vishnu becomes Vaishnava, right? So here Vikanas becomes Vaikanasa, right? In the same way. Okay, so let's continue on. So he has meditated upon God. Here the word Khan, so Vai is there, and then Khan is a verbal root, which means to dig. So Vaikanasa is a person who is dug deeply, meaning he's looked internally into himself, has gone deep into, and it is to be taken to lay bare or to lie what lies hidden, to bear to. So the word to dig, right? It means to open up what lays hidden. So what lays hidden is the secret within, right? So Gudarta Prakashana. Prakashana means to throw light on artha, the meaning of Guda, of a secret. So here's a quotation. He moved amongst the birds. This person called Vikanas, right? This sage, who was highly meditative sage. Okay, so the name of the sage occurs as Vikanaha or Vikanas, right? And also as Vaikanasa. He is considered to be Brahma in his divine. When we talk about Chaturmukha Brahma, here I'm not sure what it means by Brahma, whether it means Chaturmukha Brahma or it means the Supreme Lord. I think it means the Supreme Lord. The Supreme Lord has come in a form as a rishi, as a particular sage, and he's taught this particular system of agamas. So he's considered to be Brahma in his divine descent. And the quotation here is from Vayasika Nigantu, which will be a work telling us. Vayasika Nigantu is a work that tells us the meaning of these words. So 3 passages from the Vedas are cited to support the achievement of sage Vikanas, right? Who was an exponent of the Vishnu cult. So we have Rig Veda 155:1, right, which says, acquire the food of Soma, which belongs to you. Offer worship to the great warrior and to Vishnu, who desire to receive praise from you. The great warrior here, mentioned here, is Indra. So the quotation here is from Rig Veda 155 and 669 and 799. So these are quotations from the Rig Veda. In his Vimana Archana Kalpa, Vimana means a machine. Sometimes people say Vimana means a flying machine. Vimana means a machine. It can also have other meanings, right, in architectural books. Vimana Archana, Archana means worship, and Kalpa means ritual, the ritual of worship of the Vimana. Vimana, in this sense, could mean the top of the temple, which covers the deity, right? So in that book, Vimana Archana Kalpa, Marichi, who apparently is either the part of that book or the author of that book, gives a remark. This means that only Vishnu is to be offered worship every day. So what does he say here? He says, Tasmad Vishnur, Tasmad Vishnavarchanam Eva, Dvijay, it's a little bit difficult to read that. Dvijair, aha, means day by day. Kartavyam iti vigyate. So it is to be known that only Vishnu only, the word Eva is given here, is to be worshipped every single day. So that's a nice pramana, and that comes from the Vimana Archana Kalpa, which is a Vaikanasic text by the sage Marichi. So this means that only Vishnu is to be worshipped every day. So we have another quote down here, which says, Vaikanasam purve iha sama bhavati uhe dasharatre saptame ahmi. Okay. So continuing on. There is here an old Saman. An old Saman means a verse from the Sama Veda or Sama prayer with the name, or an old Sama Vedi maybe, with the name Vaikanasa. This is to be used on the 7th day of the 10-day sacrifice. So there's another Vedic hymn, 267, which comes from Rig Veda 873, the meaning of which is, no one can kill him who worships Indra. Okay, had its first half set in the Sama mode of chanting by Vaikanasa, by the Rishi Vaikanasa, and the latter half by Puru Hanman. Okay, so another sage, another seer. Okay, and so this is a quotation from Bhaskara's Bhashya. So there's a person called Bhaskara who's written a commentary on Samaveda Darshaya Padipa 321. Okay, so the word Vaikanasa may mean by Vikanas or a pupil or follower of Vikanas. Right. So then we have another quotation, 269, which comes from a book. There are several riks in the Rig Veda 9th mandala, right? All addressed to Soma and not to Vaikanasa. The passage cited is perhaps lost. The support, however, in favor of Vaikanasa is available from the Brihad Devata cited below. Okay, so remember, I don't know if you remember what we were talking about in another context, perhaps in another lesson, we were talking about the Brihad Devata, which is a book which tells us the meter and the deity and the rishi of each mantra in the Vedas. Okay, so so the pure person, the Vaikanasas purify the already pure person. The pure person is Vishnu, right? Mentioned here. So to purify him, one has to offer worship to him. The worship is enjoined here This is referred to in the Brihad Devata. So we get a Brihad Devata 229. Here's a quotation from that. The passages cited above convey that Vikinas was an ancient sage who was a devout worshipper of Vishnu. He belonged to the Alkeya division of the Taitiriya recension of the Krishna Yajurveda. Okay, so this is apparently coming from a book called Charna Vyuha, page 28. So Vaikanasins are naturally followers of the Krishna Yajurveda, the Taitiriya branch or shaka of the Krishna Yajurveda, right? And apparently the Taitiriya branch has also got some subdivisions, out of which there's this Alkeya subdivision. Okay, so continuing on, as he was quite familiar with the Saman chants, so he could also chant in the Sama way, the musical way of chanting, right? According to the Samaveda, as evidenced above. The exponents of the Vaikanasa systems declare that they follow the Vaikanasa recension. Okay, so the Vaikanasins, they said they'll follow the Vaikanasa recension, but here we see that above in some places it said that Vaikanasa recension is actually a subdivision of the Taitiriya Krishna Yajurveda. Okay. So now this is he says this is not correct. This idea of the Alkeya. Perhaps the name Alkeya came to be forgotten when that recension came to be called after Vikinas, who became a celebrated figure through his contribution to Vedic rites. So what he's saying is he's saying here that this subdivision, this Alkeya subdivision of the Taitiriya Krishna Yajurveda, which is a branch of the Krishna Yajurveda, right, is the original idea, and that later on it became known as Vaikanasa recension. So today people just refer to it as the Vaikanasa recension, but the original name was like this Alkeya subdivision of Taitiriya Shaka or Taitiriya recension of the Krishna Yajurveda. Alkeya came to be forgotten when that recension came to be called after Vikanasa, who became a celebrated figure through his contribution to Vedic rites. This is evident from the following passage. Now, here's a passage from Vaikanasa Shrauta Sutra, which the sutras which have to do with Shrauta acts or ceremonies, or mostly fire rituals that are done according to the Shrutis, not Shmutis, right? So the followers of Vikinas are stated to be dear to Indra, and this is the footnote here is from the Kandya Brahmana, 1457, and regarded as seers of mantras. They're regarded as rishis of mantras, and we can look in the Sama Vidana Brahmana 117, and we can find a quotation that shows that. They're acceptable for guidance not only for the hermits in their conduct, but also for worshipping Vishnu. Right. So hermits or vanaprasthas would seek the guidance of these followers of Vikinas, the Vaikanasins, the original Vaikanasins, but they're also known for worshipping Vishnu. Right. This is the original idea of it. So 273 it gives a quotation in Sanskrit from this other person, VK. I don't know who it is, VK. Anyway, there's Vaikanasa Kalpa Sutra, maybe page 4. Okay, so Vaikanasa himself is the author of a Dharma, a Griha, and Shrauta Sutras, right? So there's these Dharma Sutras which deal with Dharma, religiosity, the Griha Sutras which give us the Grihastha samskaras, the different samskaras that are performed. Now, out of the 40 samskaras, some of them are considered specifically Shrauta samskaras, and so then there are the Shrauta Sutras which deal with those. There are also other things called Paribhasha Sutras and Shubha Sutras. We won't go into those things too, but here Vaikanasa has been the author of these 3 types of sutras. So just like we have Apastamba, we have Apastamba Dharma Sutra, we have Apastamba Griha Sutra, we have Apastamba Shrauta Sutra. Similarly, Vaikanas has authored these three, Dharma Sutra, Griha Sutra, and Shrauta Sutra, which he claimed to have compiled under the guidance and instruction from Vishnu. And the quotation from that comes from also from VK, which I'm taking to mean as, just let me check, VK in the list of abbreviations means Vimana Archana Kalpa. It's that Vaikunasin text that we were discussing before. Okay, when we got the quote from Marichi previously. Okay, so now he is identified with Brahma, who is credited with the authorship of the sutras, 275. Okay, so we're going to also see that Vimana Archana Kalpa for that. So besides the ceremonial aspect, these Kalpa Sutras enjoin the worship of Vishnu, and similarly we can see the same text being quoted here. So all these informations are coming from Vimana Archana Kalpa, which is a Vaikanasic text. The directions given here for the worship are stated to be in consonance with the contents of the Vedas, and that is also coming from that same book. The Tandya Brahmana, right, 14.9.29. The Jaiminiya is a sage of the Samaveda, Brahmana. The Jaiminiya Brahmana, right, 193. Arsheya Brahmana, which Arsheya means of rishis, right? The Rishi Arsheya Brahmana, which 162. And the Taittiriya Aranyaka, which we all should be familiar with, which is a section of the Taittiriya Krishna Yajurveda, right? We have Taittiriya Aranyaka, we have Taittiriya Brahmana, right? So the Aranyaka, some of the Aranyaka, as you know, the last part, the Taittiriya Upanishad also comes in parts of the Taittiriya Aranyaka, mention the name of Vaikanasa with reference to the Dharma Sutras of Bodhayana, right? So Bodhayana, of course, is a commentator on the Taittiriya Krishna Yajurveda, so therefore the Taittiriya Aranyaka. He's given, so the Dharma Sutras of Bodhayana, right, as well as Apastamba and some others have written Dharma Sutras on Taittiriya Krishna Yajurveda, and the Griha Sutras of Agni Vesha. So that quotation there from the Taittiriya Aranyaka comes from Taittiriya Aranyaka 23.3. And then the Bodhayana Dharma Sutra 2.6.16, right? The Griha Sutras of Agni Vesh 2.6.5, and Bodhayana Griha Sutra 2.9.17, Bodhayana Shrauta Sutra 16.24.8, right? And the Hiranyakeshan Shrauta Sutra 19.3.14. So these are all the quotes. So you can see that our author here knows all about these different sutras, and he's giving the exact places where one can go and find the Shastra Pramanas for all these ideas. So all of these places cite Vikanas as an authority for their ritualistic practice in certain contexts. Okay, so these very ancient sages in themselves, Agnivesh and Bodhayana and all these people, they cite Vikanas as even older than them, and they cite him on certain rituals and for certain practices. He's the person who's cited. So Vikanas had 9 pupils. So understanding Vaikanasa Agama comes from this sage Vikanas, who is an incarnation of Brahma. Vikanas had 9 pupils according to the following sloka of Brigu. And this sloka comes from the Vikanasa Vimana Archana Kalpa. Yeah, right. Okay. So among these, Kasyapa, Atri, Marichi, and Brigu are known to have composed their own Agama texts. right? The works of others have not come down to us. Whether they wrote it all is also not known. Another point to be noted here is that there is no independent Samhita with the authorship of Vaikhanasa. So perhaps Vikanas taught in general the conduct of man and his mode of life in regard to dharma, griha, and shloka aspects, and laid stress on the need to attend to the duties concerning these with implicit faith in Vishnu. He could have directed his pupils to write only on the practical aspects of Vaishnavism in the light of his own teachings. They too must have undertaken their work accordingly. Hence, the Vaikhanasa Agamas do not treat exhaustively the Charyapada. Now, previously, I think we discussed about how the Agamas are divided up into different sections. If we haven't, let's just talk about it for a second here. That each Agama or each Samhita or each text of the Agama, which can also be called a Tantra, right, is divided up into 4 subject matters. The first subject matter is yoga. Yoga means an understanding of tattva, an understanding of the principles in this material world, right, with a special emphasis on the mystic yoga concerning when we talk about the macrocosm, we want to also understand the microcosm within the body. So relating the universe to the body of the individual and the different chakras within the body of the individual, the different power centers, which run along the spine, right, which are subtle in nature, and the different flows of energy along the different pathways, the Ida, the Pingala, and the Sushumna nadis, right, which cross over at these different power intersections, which are called chakras, from the Muladhara at the base of the spine to the Sahasradhara above the head. So, so this is all part of yoga, mystic yoga. So that's the first part. The second part, so after yoga, we have yoga, charya, yoga, jnana, kriya, and charya, I believe. Or jnana, yoga, kriya, and charya. Okay, jnana may be first and then yoga. Jnana is the knowledge of the universe. Yoga is the next. And then kriya and charya. Kriya is the activities of carving deities, or making deities, making metal deities or carving stone deities, installing them in temples and opening temples. Okay, then we have the daily and occasional rites of worship and festivals that occur in temples of the different agamas. That is in the Charya section. So here we're talking about the Charya section, which is the most studied section these days, because the Kriya and Charya sections are practical and they deal with actual rituals and worship that we do, and the others deal with more philosophical in nature, the Jnanapada, and in the second, the Yoga Pada, which deals with mystic yoga or Kundalini yoga, is also not much studied today. So, hence, Vaikhanasa Agamas do not treat exhaustively the Charyapada, or the actual daily and occasional rituals, right, which is dealt with in the Vaikhanasa Kalpa Sutras by Vikanas himself. Right, so the validity of the Vaikhanasa Agama is questioned in some quarters. The objection here is based on 2 grounds. The first raises the question of the validity of the Vaikhanasa Kalpa Sutras. These sutras, it is urged, cannot be valid, nor their author acceptable, because they are not adopted by anyone outside this group. Okay, so that's a sort of a silly criticism, just to say that something can't be acceptable because they have an exclusive group and nobody accepts them outside the group. The second criticism is based on the vocation of those who adopt them. The priest who attends to the worship of the deity, according to the Vaikhanasa Sutras, must be considered to live upon the earnings through this. He must be considered to live upon the earnings through this. So the person worships the deity in the temple, and he lives upon the earnings of worshiping the deity. The Vaikhanasa Agama has not prescribed any vocation other than attending to the worship of the deity for those who follow these sutras. Such priests are called devalakas. So remember, I've mentioned this before in some places. The word devalaka is a derogatory term used by some people. And in Sanskrit, it simply means an archika or a pujari. But the specific term devalaka means a person who only makes his money out of worshiping God. And so it's looked down upon to make your living by showing the deity or by performing rituals for the deity in the temple. And that's the only thing that you do to make money. So, and along with others whose practices are similar, they have received severe condemnation for that. They are stigmatized as not being Brahmins. They are compared to Chandalas. Okay, so when we use the word Devalaka, it's like calling a Brahmin a Chandala. Like that. Okay, so here he gives the quotation for this. 288 from the Hiranyakeshi Shrauta Sutra, 19.3.14. That actually deals with this derogatory term devalaka. Okay, so continuing on. These objections cannot stand. The Vaikhanasa Kalpa Sutras are valid like the other Kalpa Sutras, such as those of Ashvalayana. Ashvalayana is a Rig Veda Sutra, ritual sutra, Kalpa Sutra, and Apastamba, which of course is a Krishna Yajurveda, Taitira Krishna Yajurveda sage who wrote his own Dharma Sutras, Griya Sutras, and Shraddha Sutras. Okay, they are valid as they do not go against the Vedas, right? And they make use of only the mantras of the Vedas. Now, see in this footnote, he says here the word Devalaka is derived from Devakam, or it could be Devakam or Devaswam, Lati. One who takes away what belongs to the gods is called a Devalaka, right? So the donations or anything that's offered in the temple to the god, to the deity, that Pujari takes that, and therefore he's called a Devalaka. Identity of the kinds of Devalaka is cited by Yamunacharya, and in Mahabharata Shanti Parva 2874 is hard to be arrived at. See Agama Pramanya with notes by Van Voitenen. Dr. Van Voitenen has written a translation with commentary with notes by of Agama Pramanya. Agama Pramanya is a book by Yamunacharya to prove the validity of the Agama Shastra, specifically the Pancharatra Agama, but we can say here also the Vaikhanasa Agamas too. So page 125 under 34, 35, etc. And also we can also see another book called Shmriti Chandrika 2, page 395, 396, where Devala's view is cited about the Devalaka as being a despicable person. See also Aparakara, page, and that book called Aparaka, page 450 and 923. Okay, so let's start again up here. So the objection cannot stand. The Vaikhanasa Kalpa Sutras are valid like the other Kalpa Sutras, such as Ashvalayana and Apastamba and others. They are valid as they do not go against the Vedas, and they make use of only of mantras of the Vedas for any rite whatsoever. So here's the speciality of the Vaikhanasa Agamas is that they only use Vedic mantras. They don't use any other mantras. So that they do not adopt any other Kalpa Sutra is not merely a meaningless contention, but also speaks highly of their original and superior position amongst Kalpa Sutras. The sutras of Apastamba, Gautama, Yama, Manu, Sankha, Likita, Harita, Vashishta, and others adopt the sutras of Vaikhanasa for the reception and preservation of the sacred fire, right? So all of these other all of these other commentators like Apastamba, Gautama, etc., they all quote Vikanas. They all quote the Vaikhanasans, and therefore it's a much older thing. While performing Pondrika and other sacrifices, and the quotation here is from Bodhina Dhamma Sutra 2.6.16 and 3.3.14 1417, right, refers to the views of Vaikhanasa. Govinda Swamin, on the above, mentions the Vaikhanasas, and we should also see 3, 21 and 23, right? Haridatta on the Apastamba Dharma Sutra 2, 8, 11, 20, and Gautama 3, 21. So all of these people have mentioned the Vaikhanasa Sutras and have mentioned the Vaikhanasa Kalpa Sutras and Vikanas. And they quote him as an authority, a Purva authority, a previous Acharya. So Vishnu alone is to be worshipped according to these sutras, which therefore should be considered as sattvika, right? Considered as sattvika because they provide for the worship of only Vishnu. Remember that when we talk about the Puranas, also the Mahapurana, when we talk about different literatures, right? Those literatures which recommend the worship of Vishnu, they're considered sattvika. Vishnu is, of course, the Sattva Guna avatar. If we talk about the Guna avatars, we talk about Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva. So Brahma is a Rajaguna avatar, Shiva is a Tamaguna avatar, Vishnu is a Sattva Guna avatar. So when we recommend the worship of Vishnu, we're recommending sattvic worship. We're worshiping the mode of goodness. They prescribe these rules in accordance with the duties of the castes and orders of life, meaning the varnas and ashramas. And the Vaikhanasa Agamas must not, therefore, be denied validity merely because they deal with matters according to the Vaikhanasa Kalpa Sutras. Right. So now, those who have adopted these sutras to guide their religious practices have been studying the Vedas through the generations and gone through all the secular and religious purificatory rites, what's called samskaras, enjoined within them. They have been following the rules prescribed for castes and orders of life, the Varnashram Dharmas. They are diligent in doing the duties prescribed to them. They are Brahmins devoted only to God, only to Vishnu, really, right? When he says here God. Therefore, they are not inferior to any other group in the Hindu community. Right, so now, those who follow the Vaikhanasa Agama, the texts of which are composed by Kashyapa, Atri, and others, remember that Vikanas himself has not written any text, all right, of the Agamas, any Samhita text, right? So Kashyapa, Atri, some of his 9 pupils have written them. Right, are required by virtue of the following the Vaikhanasa Kalpa Sutra to perform the worship of God in archa form. Archa form means not just in the form of the fire, but also in the form of an actual figure, an actual solid 3D figure. So this work is not prompted by the need to earn a living. On the other hand, they would be degraded if they do not discharge this duty. So it's not their fault that they worship the deity in the temple, and so you can't fault them for making their particular Kalpa Sutra has said their only method of their only job, their only occupation is worshiping the deity. So therefore, you can't fault them for making their living by doing so. So the definition Devalaka does not apply to them, right? So Kashyapa, Atri, and other authors of the Vaikhanasa texts are as authoritative as Manu, Narada, and others whose smritis are wholly valid. So we can say that these Vaikhanasa texts are authentic, they're authoritative, and they're just as authoritative as these other texts by Manu or by Narada. So then that these are not included within the well-known subjects of learning, right? So the Vidyasthanas, Sthana means places of learning, or Vidyasthanas means subjects, right, of learning, of knowledge. And these subjects are mentioned as from, if we look in the Yajnavalkya Smriti and Vishnu Purana. So if we look in Yajnavalkya Smriti 1.3 and Vishnu Purana 3.6, 28 and 29, it gives a list of the different subjects of learning that have to be studied. So the fact that they're not mentioned, the fact that the Vaikhanasa Sutras or the Samhitas of Atri and Kashyapa and Marichi, the different pupils of Vaikhanasa, are not mentioned in those, which there's no argument about that. Since their number 14 only implies that some more could be added to the list. Okay, so the list that's given in Yajnavalkya Smriti and Vishnu Purana of different subjects to learn, right, is not exhaustive, is what he's saying. All that enlightened and good people believe in could not be traced to this list, and something not found there could not, on that account alone, be condoned. Okay, so it would be inappropriate to treat the epics, the Itihasas, meaning Ramayana and Mahabharata, like the Mahabharata and the Ramayana, as forming a part of a separate Vidyasthana. So he gives an example there, right? That maybe in this list in Vishnu Purana and Yajnavalkya Smriti of different subjects to be learned, the Itihasas, the Mahabharata and Ramayana are not mentioned. So, but we know that they have to be, that they are authentic books, and that they have to be accepted like that. So what he's just saying is that anybody who says, well, look in the Yajnavalkya Smriti and the Vishnu Purana in this list, it's not mentioned at all, so therefore we can't accept it. No, this list is not a complete list. Right. So other Dharma Shastra texts do not expatiate on the celebration of festivals, but the Vaikhanasa Agamas have an elaborate treatment of festivals, right? This is no reason to declare the latter's invalidity. Like some Dharma Shastra texts, like the Agni Vesha Griha Sutra, right, pages 71 to 73, he's quoting here, right, recognize the worship of God. The Vaikhanasa Sutras recognize the worship of God, both just, and specifically Vishnu, both just indicate the mode of worship. On this is based the detailed treatment of this subject in the Vaikhanasa Agamas. The elaboration is not, therefore, lacking in authority of the Agamas, and the Agamas do not cease to be valid because of it. Okay, so here's another argument. This is also a silly argument. They say because these books are very elaborate, and they go into elaborate detail about festivals, and somehow that makes them invalid. So he's saying there's no reason to think that these texts are invalid just because they're elaborate. Right. Finally, it must be said that the Mahabharata mentions both the Vaikhanasa and Pancharatra Agamas as being equally valid. Right. So here we have the quotation. This is a very good quotation. Right. So if we ever meet any Advaitins or meet some people who decry the Agamas, right, who are only interested in say, no, only Vedic. Somebody might say only this or only that is a method of worship, right? If you say no, the Agamas are to be accepted. Here's a quotation from Mahabharata about that. It comes from Ashwamedika Parva, 104, 87. The Vaikhanasa Agama is ancient, as it is mostly free from the influence of tantrika practices. The Vaishnava Dharma Parvan, right, which is quoted in Ashwamedha Parva of Mahabharata, 104, 84 to 89, right, which comes just before this quotation above. So where it's mentioned is not admitted by modern scholars to be earlier to the nuclear portion of the epic. Okay. Okay, so maybe modern scholars are saying that these quotations about Vaishnava Dharma, right, which come in the Ashwamedika Parvan of the Mahabharata, are considered later interpolations by modern scholars. Okay, that's fine. Anyway, the cult of Vaikhanasa must be as old as Pancharatra, right? So in any case, it's, even if it's not considered older than Pancharatra, it's definitely by modern scholars considered at least equal to in age in Pancharatra, as Pancharatra. The account of the Pancharatra doctrine is put into the mouth of Bhishma. Bhishma speaks in the Mahabharata about the Pancharatra doctrine, whose discourses are contained in the Shanti Parvan of the epic. And the quotation there is from Mahabharata Shanti Parva. If we want to look up what Bhishma says about Pancharatra, which is a good idea, we should probably look that up and read it. It's in Shanti Parva 342 to 360. Okay, so Bhishma died before the beginning of Kali Yuga. The traditional date for the beginning of Kali Yuga is 3101 BCE, before the Common Era. And so the doctrines of Vaikhanasa and Pancharatra are as old as the date of the epic, which is fixed at about 3000 BCE. 3000 BCE. So we can say that Kali Yuga started, the traditional date is 3101 BCE, and we have therefore fixed, he's fixing the date of a traditional date for the writing of Mahabharata as 3000 BCE. When it was narrated to Janmejaya by Vyasa's pupil Vaishampayana. So when we read the Mahabharata, we see that Vaishampayana is the sage who is relating much of the Mahabharata to Janmejaya, who is this pupil of Vyasa, Vedavyasa. Just like we see the Vishnu Sahasranam, we see Vaishampayana Vacha, Vaishampayan said. And similarly, just like in the Bhagavad Gita section, we have Sanjaya Vacha, Sanjaya is telling. So there are, within the Mahabharata, of course, there are stories within stories. So that this Agama was also known as Bhagavata, right, is evident from the references with the commentators. These commentators, so in the introduction to the Vaikhanasa Archana Kalpa, the Vimana Archana Kalpa, right, which is Vaikhanasa text, it says, it is, however, inappropriate to take, as the editor has done in this introduction, the word Bhagavata, right, occurring in the Agama Pramanya of Yamuna, right, in the sense of Vikanas. It is of interest to note that he who takes to the worship of Vishnu is known as Bhagavata. So in the Brihad Samhita 110:19, the name also denotes, according to Atri 384, right, anyone who is unfit for any work, and so takes to the worship of a deity, including Shiva or others, right? So according to the Brihad Samhita, there's some different understanding of the word Bhagavata, but here he's using the word Bhagavata in the general sense that we know it, which means somebody who worships Vishnu, like that. But in fact, if we look at the word Bhagavata, literally, it can mean somebody who worships Bhagawan. So depending on who you think, if you think Shiva is Bhagawan, then perhaps it could mean a worshiper of Shiva, which is what Brihad Samhita is saying here. But in fact, today, exclusively, if we use the word Bhagavata, we're talking about Vaishnavas, we're talking about people who worship Lord Vishnu. So that this Agama is also known as Bhagavata is evident from the references which the commentators have made on the Kalpa, right? Okay, on the Kalpa Sutras, right? Identifying the sutras of the Bhagavatas as those compiled by Vikanas. Bana, describing Divakara Mitra, the Buddhist monk, in his Harsha Charita, says, and this is a quotation from Harsha Charita, and the quotation here, we'll have to continue on. We'll see what this says, right? It says, it is here said that the Buddhist monk, this Buddhist monk called Divakara Mitra, right, which is sort of interesting, means Mitra means friend, Divakara means of the day, friend of the day, Divakara. So Bana is describing in his book Harsha Charita about a Buddhist monk who was, I guess, studying in India, right? It is here said that the Buddhist monk was attended by a number of people who became his disciples. They were the followers of various systems of faith. So here he's going to explain this word Bhagavata. Here the words Bhagavata or Upanishada, right, which means, so Bhagavata would be a follower of Bhagavan. Upanishada is a follower of the Upanishads. Aishvarakaranika, and Puranika is a follower of the Puranas, and Pancharatrika is a follower of the Pancharatra. Aishvarakaranika. I don't know what that means exactly. Occur. So these different words occur in this book for different people who are different followers who apparently gave up those schools of thought and went to study under a Buddhist monk, right? Occur to mean respectively the devotees of Vishnu, right? The first one is Bhagavata, right? The Upanishada, followers of the Upanishads, right? Aishvar Karanika are the Nyayikas, the followers of the Nyaya system or the logic system, right? Preachers of the Puranas, right? The Puranika, and the followers of the Pancharatra system. Those who follow the Upanishads, the Nyaya system, and the Puranas could be taken to have faith in Vishnu and other deities as well, right? So because there are Shaiva Upanishads, there are other Upanishads which supposedly represent the worship of different deities. So the Nyaya system also can be understood. So those people who follow the Puranas, because we have more than just the Sattvika Puranas, which recommend the worship of Vishnu. We have also Tamasic and Rajasic Puranas as well, which recommend other deities to be worshipped. So out of those, only the Pancharatra and the Vaikanasins are strictly worshippers of Vishnu. The devotees of Vishnu and the followers of the Pancharatra system are exclusively attached to Vishnu. The word Bhagavan denotes primarily Vishnu, and the quotation here is from 296. Let's see. 296. The quotation here given is from Vishnu Purana 6.5.69 and also from Vishnu Purana 6.5.76 and 77. Right, so this is where the word Bhagavata or Bhagavan's explained. The word Bhagavan is explained in Vishnu Purana. And so Bhagavan is supposedly, according to the Vishnu Purana quote here, that's a good quote to know, means Vishnu and no other deity. The word Pancharatrika and Bhagavata must be taken to mean two groups of devotees of Vishnu. Hence, the Bhagavatas must be different from the followers of Pancharatra, right? Because of this quotation that we had before from Harsha Charita. Was it from Harsha Charita? Yeah, by Bana. Okay. So, hence the Bhagavatas must be different from the followers of the Pancharatra. They should be the worshippers of the Lord described as Bhagavan in the Vishnu Purana, which means Bhagavad Gita, and Bhagavad Gita. So in the Bhagavad Gita and the Mahabharata, Bhagavan also, it means Bhagavan Sri Krishna. That means Vishnu. So, or they may be the Vaikanasins, right? The Vaikanasas. This identification requires stronger evidence, but here we have some evidence of that. So if it is admitted, the Vaikanasa system may be taken to have been in vogue at the beginning of the 7th century AD, right? Because that's where we have these quotations from. 7th century AD, right? So the 600s. So AD we can also say as CE, Common Era. The Avanti Sundari of Dandin, right, 675 AD or CE, right? So this is part of this. This is in the 7th century. Refers to the worship of Vaikanasa kind, in the following passage. So it says this gives the latter half of the 7th century as a period during which the rites according to the system of Vikanas were observed. And the quotation here is from the Avanti Sundari, page 156. The Vaikanasa Agamas are mainly concerned with the worship of the Lord in a concrete form. To that end, I detailed the selection of a site, the building of a temple, choosing the materials like wood and stone, right? I guess, or even metal, right? And production of deities of various kinds, their installation, method of worship, private and public festivals, the expiation or atonement for sins of omission and commission. Apart from Vishnu, other deities like Rudra, Shiva, Devi, Vinayaka, Shanmukha, which means Kartikeya or Murugan, Subramanya, right? And Surya, etc., are required to be worshipped, right? And so that's a quotation here coming from, let's see, from the Vimana Archana Kalpa, which we've been quoting all along, 20, from KA and SA. KA means the Kriyadikara, which is another Agamic book, and the essay, which is the Samurtarchana Adhikarana, right, which talks about deity worship. Okay, so the reason given for the worship of Rudra is interesting, right? So many, these are all attendant deities to Lord Vishnu that are worshipped in these Agamas. So many other ways are available for offering worship to God, like Pancharatri Yoga and others. Yet the Vaikhanasa mode is said to be the best and most pleasing to God, right? And the quotation here comes from that Kriyadikara 30, 36, 26, and 27. Okay, so in this connection, the following passage is of significance, and this also comes from SA, which is the Samurtarchana Adhikarana. I think Samurta. What's the name of the book? The name of the book is Samurtarchana Adhikarana. Yes, correct. Okay, so number 30, 31, 58, and 59. There's the quotation above. The expression Vishishta Dvaita Pujana must be taken to be the way of worshipping God in accordance with the doctrines of the Vishishta Dvaita system. So that's very interesting. So here, in this particular quotation here, we have the word Vishishta. Vishishta Dvaita Pujanam is the last word in the sloka. Yeah? So here we have, is very significant. There's a significant passage here in this book which mentions Vishishta Dvaita Agama. This Vishishta Dvaita as puja according to Vishishta Dvaita, right, must be taken as the way of worshipping God in accordance with the doctrines of the Vishishta Dvaita system. The word Vishishta Dvaita, right, which is the Vedantic system of Ramanuja, right, came to be used to refer to the system of Vedanta expounded by Ramanuja during the 13th century. During the 13th century, actually, we can say that the 12th century. I don't know why it says 13th century here, because Ramanuja is 1017 to 1137, so that should be the 12th century, right? So the 11th and 12th century. Okay, so not the 13th century as written here. So 300 is the quotation here, and this comes from, I believe it's a magazine called Brahma Vidya, 2026 parts 3 and 4. Sudarshana Suri, who is a later commentator on the Brahma Sutras, he wrote the Shruta Prakashika commentary on Ramanuja's Srivasya, right, was the earliest writer to use this word, right? So Ramanuja himself never used the word Vishishta Dvaita, but Sudarshana Suri, his commentator, has used it in Shruta Prakashika. See Srivasya with 10 commentaries, Madras edition, right, page 958. Also, we can also see Vedanta Sangraha Tatparya Dipika. So Tatparya Dipika would be a commentary on Vedanta Sangraha, which was a book on Upanishads on the general meaning of the Upanishads by Ramanuja, right, one of Ramanuja's 9 works. And he says here he's quoting the Vrindavan edition. So there was an edition printed in Vrindavan. Yes, that's Vrindavan in North India, page 46. And then we can also see this quotation about the antiquity of the term Vishishta Dvaita in an article written in Brahma Vidya magazine 26 parts 3 and 4 by the same author as this text, Vivaradachari. Okay, so that's if we want to look into the origins of the word of the term Vishishta Dvaita. This passage must have been added to the. Okay, so I think here what he's saying is although he's it's a little this last sentence where he says the system of Vedanta expounded by Ramanuja only during the 13th century. So later on, Vishishta Dvaita only during the 13th century, 100 years later, after Ramanuja, did this term Vishishta Dvaita come into vogue. That's what he's trying to say. This message must have been added to the Atri Samhita after this period, right? So we see additions and subtractions. Sometimes these are called interpolations or extrapolations to different texts. So he's considering that this Atri Samhita must have had this added to it, right? Because we don't know, we don't see the term Vishishta Dvaita coming before. Yet one cannot miss the desire behind the addition to the text. It is to harmonize the mode of worship taught by Vikanas with the doctrines of Vishishta Dvaita system. Now, in actual fact, right, today, if we talk to Vaikanasins, right, they will describe their philosophy as Lakshmi Vishishta Dvaita. It's called Lakshmi Vishishta Dvaita, and I'm not exactly sure how they differentiate it between the other Vishishta Dvaita of Ramanuja, but they have their own distinct philosophy in some ways, the Vaikanasins. So although not generally Vaikanasins are considered a subsection of the Sri Vaishnava Sampradaya, still they have some things which they differ with other Vishishta Dvaitins, other followers of Ramanuja on. So there are many, many groups within the Sri Vaishnava Sampradaya. Vaikanasins are one of them. So regarding the installation of deities and the need to worship, a question is generally raised. The Lord is everywhere. Why should there be invocation or avahana and dismissal or visarjana of the deity? Because the Lord's everywhere. So why do we have to call the Lord from some place to come here when he's already here? And why do we have to send him away back to his place when he's going to stay here? He's always staying here. So the answer is given thus in the Vaikanasa Agama. The Lord is all pervasive. Invocation means inviting him through mantras and requesting him to be in one particular place to receive worship. Otherwise, even gods cannot adore him. While he is invoked, he compresses his expansive form out of kindness for his devotees, just as the peacock does with its tail plumes, right? So when we see a male peacock showing its feathers, it spreads out its feathers. But when it gets excited, it may close its feathers and become smaller, like that. So the Lord is so great, he's everywhere. But our prayer to him to come and to reside within the deity and to accept our worship, he compresses himself and resides within the deity, according to our prayers to worship him in a finite form. So he compresses his expansive form out of kindness for his devotees, just as the peacock does its tail plumes. Vishnu shines in the heart of the devotee who meditates upon him as the fire in the forest blazes forth, right, in a particular place there. So that's a quotation from, that's Archana Murti Adhikara, 31:59 to 65. Okay, so the words of Markandeya cited here are worth noting. This comes from this other book, Samurti Archana Adhikarana, right, 31, 66, and 67. Knowledge of the ultimate reality is admitted by all the schools of thought as the means of obtaining freedom from bondage. The reality must be known as it is without there being any room for uncertainty or delusion, right? So just as we have this idea of jnana moksha, from knowledge comes, from real knowledge of truth comes liberation. Such knowledge is called tattva jnana, which is why the first part of all the Agamas is called is jnana pada. So reality, which is referred to by the word tattva, right, which means a principle, right, is taken differently by different schools of thought. The Vishishta Dvaita school recognizes three tattvas or three principles: chit, achit, and ishvara, sentient, insentient, and God. The Vaikanasa Agama offers a very direct interpretation. The Vedas declare Narayana to be the supreme tattva. So the word tat, right, must be taken to refer to Vishnu. So tattva, right? That tat in tattva means Vishnu, according to the Vaishnavism Agama. The Paramatma is the object of tattva jnanam, of knowledge of these principles. The individual self is the knower, right? And the Vedas represent the knowledge, tattva jnana. Okay, good. So here we have some other quotations, right? Another quotation from Vimana Archana Kalpa, which is our main text for Vaishnavism Agama. All right, so then Brahman, Paramatman, and Narayana and Vishnu, Brahman, Paramatman, Narayana, and Vishnu are the names by which this reality is referred to. It has two aspects, namely being partless and being possessed of parts. So two aspects. So it has partless aspect, the whole, and then and possessed of parts. So this is a quotation from Vimana Kalpa, Vigama Agama Kalpa. What's it called? Vimana Archana Kalpa, yeah, which is our main text. The former Nishkala, which meaning the partless or the whole, right, has full pervasion, right, and both internal and external. So God has full pervasion; He pervades everything internally and externally. As it is very subtle, its nature cannot be determined. Hence, some Vedantins, right, in the same book, in the same Vimana Archana Kalpa, right, it says, declare that it has both existence and non-existence, sadasat. He is the self of all. He is present in the akasha. Akasha means sky. Within the lotus leaf of the heart. So there is some akasha in the heart, and the Lord is considered to be there within the heart. Right? The lotus-like heart in the flame of the Vaishvanara fire. Right? So this is also a quotation from Narayana Upanishad 13, which is quoted in the Vimana Archana Kalpa, page 493. So Tasya Shikhaya Madhye Parama Atma Vyavashtitaha Sabrahma Sashiva Sendra Shokshara Paramasvarat. Right? We all know that. Right? This is part of our chanting of Narayana Suktam. Right? So then it says the word Brahma Vadinaha denotes those who have realized Brahman and therefore expound its reality. The word Sarasat does not refer to the Advaitic concept Sarasat here. So when the Vaishnavas use this word Sarasat, they don't mean the Advaitin concept of both being existent and non-existent, right? Because Advaitins, just as a side here, talk about that Nirguna Brahman or distinctless, attributeless Brahman is the only one reality, and therefore it has. But we see the world is full of difference, and to account for that, they say Maya acts upon this one Brahman. And then when we say to them, how can Maya be a separate thing which acts on Brahman if there's only one thing Brahman? Where does Maya come in, right? If there's only one thing. So then they say, well, Maya is not real. And then you say, if it's not real, how can it act? Well, then they say, well, it's both real and not real. So this sadasat, it means it's something that's existent and non-existent, but in the sense of that the Advaitins use it is not the sense that the Vaishnavas use it, right? Right? They simply use it in the sense that God is all expansive, but He's also can be contracted. So at one and the same time. So here and be within the heart or within the Vaishvanara, the fire of digestion in the body, right? The Nishkala form, right, which again is the partless form, right, is like ghee in milk, right? So in milk there's ghee. We have to churn the milk, We have to do different things to the milk. First of all, we have to change the milk into yogurt and then churn it, and then we get the ghee come out. Or there's different ways of condensing milk in a certain way that we get the ghee out of it. But otherwise, ghee is homogeneous in milk, right? So there's ghee in milk. If somebody gives you some milk, you say, well, there's some ghee in there, some butterfat in there, right? But because it's pervasive throughout the milk, we don't see it, right? So the Lord is everywhere in this universe, but because we don't see him directly, because he's so diffuse, right? Partless. So oil in sesame, right? Sesame seeds don't seem oily, right? Until you crush them up and get the oil out of them, but there's oil in there. Fragrance in a flower, right? We look at a flower, we don't see the fragrance, but if we get up close, we can smell it. It's diffusing from the flower, right? We can't exactly find out the place in the flower where it starts. Juice in a fruit, right? If you have a fruit and you juice it, if you have a fruit, it seems solid, but once you juice it, it becomes liquid, right? And fire in wood. So wood itself has the potential for fire within it, which comes out through friction, right? When we make a fire, when we churn the agni, arni manta, and we make the sacrificial fire, balagni, right? The fire comes out from the wood. Ghee, oil, and these others mentioned here issue out of those things within which they are lying latent. So similarly, the Supreme Lord is there within everything, and he's lying there latent. He's lying there inert, and he then comes into the form of the deity, condenses himself and comes into the form of the deity so that we can worship him. It's because, these examples are really good. So we can't use the ghee unless we make the ghee out of the milk. We can't use the oil unless we crush the sesame. We can't use the fragrance of the flower unless we get close to the flower and we are able to smell the fragrance. We can't drink the fruit unless we juice it. We can't get fire out of the wood unless we use friction, right? So all of these processes help us to distill the essence of the Lord, right? So similarly, the Agamas, especially the Vaishnavism Agama here, is being said to distill the partless essence of the Lord, who's all pervasive, into a particular place and concentrate him there so that we can concentrate our worship of him in a particular place through the deity. So when a self meditates upon the Nishkala aspect of Brahman, so really difficult to meditate upon the Lord in a partless form, right, in a diffuse form, there appears forth Brahman revealing in full its individual features. Devotion, which takes the form of meditation, rubs or strikes it, right? So this devotion or meditation is being compared to the friction that we use to create the fire from wood. And there arises the sakala. So the nishkala is the partless, the sakala is the one that has the part, that is the deity. So sakala, 305. So here, this is also another quotation from Vimana Arjuna Kalpa, which is our main text for Pancharatra. For Vaikhanasa. And the meditator thinks of a particular form of the deity. When the faggot, meaning the stick, the sacrificial stick, arni, right? I talked about the arni manta, right? There's a particular type of wood which is used for making the balagni, the infant agni, infant fire, right? Is rubbed. Sparks of fire fly forth. Brahma, Shiva, and others who emanate from Brahman, right, are different from it, like sparks of fire from fire. Okay, so we've heard this before, that the individual Atman, the Jiva-Atman, right, in this case we're talking about Brahma and Shiva and other devatas who are great personalities, but still Atmans. They are all like sparks which emanate from a great fire. The Lord is the great fire, and the little sparks come out. So this rubbing of the wood, right, makes sparks come out like that. So just like that. The lump of mud placed on the potter's wheel, right? So we have a potter's wheel that goes around, and the potter puts a lump of clay or mud on the wheel, and then he shapes it. Is not distinct from the jar, the plate, or other things made out of it. Right? These are common discussions when we're talking about the process of creation, because the Lord is, according to the Vishishtadvaita Vedanta, And according to some other schools also of Vaishnavism, the Lord is both the nimitta and the upadana karana. He is the efficient and he is the material creation of the creator of the world. So he is also the clay and he is also the potter, right? So here the analogy is being given that the lump of clay that the potter puts on the wheel is non-different from the jar or the plate, the thing that he makes at the end product. It's non-different, but it has to be shaped. The material is the same, right? But it has to be shaped. It's shaped in a different way. The meditator can think of such forms which are different from and also identical with Brahman. Okay, so these deity forms are these different forms that we meditate upon within the heart for internal worship or external worship, right? They are different in one sense to the Supreme, the absolute Brahman, but they're also the same as him, just in the same way as the clay is the same as the plate or the jar or the vase that the vase that the potter makes, the pot that he makes. The meditator can think of such forms that which are different from and also identical to Brahman, the Supreme Brahman. Vishnu takes the form which is taken to represent the sakala aspect of Brahman, like that. So when the Supreme diffused Lord becomes concentrated in that deity, right? We know that deity to be Vishnu for the purpose of creation, protection, and destruction of all beings. This is all according to Vaishnavism Agamas. So this is the quotation given from again from Vimana Archana Kalpa, page 493. Shri or Lakshmi, who is eternal and whose form is not manifested, belongs to him as his power or Shakti, right? So this is the view. Let's see what the view of Shri is here about in the Vaishnavism Agama. Right, Shri is ever in agreement with his will. She is ever in the form of bliss. She is in the form of primordial matter or mula prakriti, right? So this quotation comes from, again, from Vimana Archana Kalpa, page 493 and 494. She is the cause for the Lord taking to any activity. So she's like a catalyst. She's like a catalyst that makes him to perform activity. So 307, that's also from the same Vimana Archana Kalpa, page 494. Right? This concept is in agreement with that of the Tantras. Okay, good. So now continue on. The Lord Bhagavan could be worshipped in 4 ways. There's 4 ways to worship the Lord. Now that we've dealt with the objections to the Vaishnavism Agama, now that we've dealt with the antiquity of the Vaishnavism Agama, now that we've dealt with who the Vaishnavism Agama worships, we've dealt with the concept of Vishnu. We've understood the concept of Vishnu. We've also understood in a very small paragraph, we understand the relationship he has to Shri, to the goddess Lakshmi in the Vaishnavism Agama. So now we're talking about different methods of worship.